Hey everybody, Mr. W here. Today's lesson is how to divide with decimal divisors and whole number dividends. Decimal divisors means that your divisor has a decimal point. In this case, that would be 6/10. Whole number dividends means that the number in the box, the dividend, does not have a decimal point. It is a whole number. Okay, so how you do this is that you want to move your divisor decimal point all the way to the right so that you make a whole number. Count the number of spaces that you moved because you'll need that information later, and then rewrite that divisor as a whole number. In this case, it would become 6 instead of 6/10. Next, you want to create a decimal point for the dividend, and then move that decimal point to the right the same number of spaces, in this case, 1 space. Then you rewrite the number, and you put a 0 in any of the empty spaces. After that, just divide the problem as normal. You would use the same steps. It doesn't matter if you have, you need to do it 2 digits. It would just be 2 digits, right? And then you would go to the 4 inside, make your decimal point, move that over, and when you rewrite that, you would just add a 0 for each of the decimal places that you made, right? Or in number 2, you see that you have 3 decimal points. It would be the same procedure. You would just move it 3, instead of 1 or 2. And you just put zeros in your empty spots, okay? Let's go back to the original problem again, okay? So where do we start? We make a decimal point for the divisor, slide it all the way over to the right and count the number of spaces, and then we're going to write that 6/10 as a whole number. It becomes 6. Next, we create a decimal point for the dividend, and we're going to move that also over to the right, the same number of spaces, in this case 1 space, and rewrite that number, and we add a 0 for any of the extra spaces that we made. Then you just divide the problem as normal. Okay, so we'll start with our regular division steps. We'll start with the 1 and ask yourself, how many times can your divisor of 6 go into 1 without going over? And that would be 0 times, because if you have 1 donut, you can't get 6 out of that, right? Okay, so then we go to the second digit, and we're looking at that as now as 15. Ask yourself, how many times can 6 go into 15 without going over? If you do your calculations, that would be 2 times, because 6 times 2 is 12. That's as close as you can get, okay? The 2 goes on top over the 5. The 12 goes underneath the 15. And we subtract because we want to see how close did we get. We got to within 3. Next, we're going to bring down the 0, and we create the number 30. Ask yourself, how many times can 6 go into 30 without going over? If you do your calculations, that would be 6 times 5. So 6 will go into 30 5 times. The 5 goes on top. The 30 goes underneath, and then we subtract to see the difference. And in this case, we have 0. And that's all. We don't have any other numbers to bring down. So our final answer you would write simply as 25. Okay, let's review. When we do problems like this that has a decimal point on your divisor, our job is to move the decimal point for the divisor all the way to the right so that we make a whole number, count your spaces, and then rewrite that as a whole number. Next, you go to your dividend. Notice it doesn't have a decimal point, so you just make one, and then shift that decimal point the same number of spaces that you did before. Rewrite that number, but add a 0 in any of the spaces that you made. Then you're just going to divide that problem as normal. Well, thank you so much. If you made it this far, great job. Keep working on your division. Takes a little bit of practice, but you'll get there if you stick with it. And we hope to see you guys on the next one.